How's it going, everybody? I'm Rob Fishbeck, and I'm here today to talk about one of the greatest albums that's ever been made, ever. I'm doing something new on this channel, doing something live. Going to sit here and talk about one of my favorite records of all time. That is 1978's Darkness on the Edge of Town by Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. I'm going to kick things off by reading a little bit. Lights out tonight, trouble in the heartland, got a head-on collision, smashing in my guts, man. I'm caught in a crossfire that I don't understand. I don't give a damn for the same old played out scenes. I don't give a damn for just the in-betweens. Honey, I want the heart. I want the soul. I want control right now. It's crazy. If you're watching this video and you're not familiar with Springsteen's work, there's a lot that we can talk about. If you're watching this video and you are familiar with Springsteen's work, we've got a lot to talk about as well. I'm going to be rambling here for a little bit. I'm going to go over all the songs on the record, why the album matters so much to me, why it's so important to me, and possibly why it's Springsteen's best output ever. I do think it is a masterpiece in capital letters. So I will lead with that. Obviously, the E Street Band's out on tour right now, first time in 6-7 years. It's crazy. I'm hopefully going to be going to see them here very soon. So I've been listening to some Bruce recently. Again, he's probably my favorite artist of all time, and remembered why it's Darkness on the Edge of Town, specifically why that album, and specifically why those 10 tracks that appear on that record. If you're familiar with Springsteen, you've ever seen the live at the Paramount versions of this album from 2009, highly recommend it. Maybe I'll even put the link in the chat later. But let's start things off. Let's look at this. Let's look at this cover. Okay. It's bleak. If just to kind of catch everybody up, this is his 4th studio album. He's been doing this since 1973 with Greetings from Asbury Park. Obviously, Born to Run was a big hit for him. And then he got into this legal battle with his former manager, Mike Appel. And it was this whole thing. There's a great documentary called The Promise, the making of the Darkness on the Edge of Town, that I highly recommend for people to watch as well. Does a great job at explaining all of the details of that. But the guy was going through the ringer. He finally had some success, but because of bullshit basically in the music industry, he wasn't able to make another album quite yet because he was in this legal battle. So the band just toured, and they toured, and they toured, and he kept writing and writing. And for the first time, really, I think in his life, he was listening to a lot of country music. I was reading in, his autobiography that he had, a Hank Williams cassette tape, and he would drive around at night and listen to that sort of stuff. And this is definitely that transformative period in Springsteen's work where he's going from, the first 2 records were very much Bob Dylan, very much Van Morrison. They had a lot of rhythm and blues elements, which a lot of his music, like Stuff on the River had that as well later on. But, when Born to Run was very much a tip of the hat to Phil Spector's wall of sound, this crazy, dense music with all of these things going on and all of these things happening. And those 8 tracks are, just absolutely unbelievable as well in their own right. For me, and, Jimmy Iovine showed up for that record. But for me, it really boils down to 3 people on this album that I really think just kind of, bring, obviously Bruce's songs are obviously, a number one, probably the most important. If you don't have the songs, nothing else matters. What it boils down to, and as a songwriter myself, I say this all the time. If you can't play the song on the piano or on an acoustic guitar as just what it is, it's not a song. It's something else. And a lot of music that's come out in the last 40 years is something else, and there's just not a lot of great songs that people push out there and market anymore. And the death of the album, that's a whole different conversation. But the songs are number one most important. But then you've also got, Jimmy Iovine. And a lot of people have told me this, that in 79, when Tom Petty's Damn the Torpedoes came out, which was his 3rd album, they'd never heard drums that had sounded like that before. And obviously, that's a lot of credit to Jimmy Iovine as a producer, as an engineer, as an overall being in the studio, a visionary, somebody that knows how are we going to make this the best product we possibly can make it, you know. And product is a term that's relevant in terms of pushing, you know, packages and selling albums. But it also comes down to, how do we make a great album, you know? And I always tell people, I say, you know, Damn the Torpedoes, again, that album's phenomenal. But go listen to Darkness on the Edge of Town, because, you know, they spent a long time trying to get the drums to sound just right, you know. And if you listen to the record, I mean, for one, Clarence is only on 3 tracks on the whole album. You know, he's on Badlands, and then you don't get him again till side 2, track A, with The Promised Land. And then you get him briefly on Prove It All Night. But when he shows up, it's this triumphant, epic, you know, scale sort of thing. It's very cinematic quality. And we'll talk more about the cinematic-ness of his music here in a little bit. But with Max's drumming, right, it's so there. It's so in your face. I mean, Gary's bass playing and Steve's guitar playing and Danny and Roy and all that stuff as well. Very, very, very much so. And Roy's elegant piano playing cannot be understated. He's just a master at it. But, and again, it comes back to the songs. But if you listen to the drums on the record, it's so unique, and it's such a tonal piece. It's such a unique album that is not a concept album. You know, there's, you know, Dark Side of the Moon, you could say, is a concept album, but not really. The Wall by Pink Floyd, I think, is definitely much more of a concept, right? And I don't really like that term thematically. You know, every album's got certain themes that you're dealing with, whether it's love or lust or, you know, death or getting over something or becoming a grown up and, you know, living in the adult world or whatever it is, you know, shedding the skin of, you know, being a teenager, whatever. Every album's got its themes. And Bruce was writing so many songs. And I also recommend the album, the double album, The Promise, which was all these outtakes. And it's so funny because you listen to that album and you go, that's a hit, that's a hit, that's a hit, that's a hit. You know, Springsteen could have had a very different career as more of a almost like a pop songwriter and have, like, you know, top of the pops, like Billboard charting singles, which he later had a little bit with like Hungry Heart and Dancing in the Dark and all that stuff. But Bruce was like, well, hey, it's got to fit this specific mold. And if it doesn't fit this specific mold, you can't have too many love songs. You can't really have any love songs. You can't have too many ballads. You can't have too many rockers. You can't have too many songs that are optimistic, right? It's got to be kind of one of each, right? So the 10 tracks that it boils down to, you know, and that process, like, okay, you know, you could have put Because the Night on there. You could have put Fire on there, or One Way Street, or Rendezvous, or The Promise, or whatever it be, but the album would change. And the stark imagery that you get, that's very much from the concept of country music. You know, and he's talked about this before, and I've talked about this before, that rock and roll is, you know, Saturday night. You know, Elton John, Saturday night's all right for fighting. But Sunday is Chris Christopherson's Sunday Morning Coming Down. It's the adult realism of, you know, the rock and roll, you know, romance, the romantic side of what rock and roll music is supposed to be, right? But country music, what country music is supposed to be is songs about the adult life, about adult challenges and compromises and, you know, what it's like to be an adult, right? Country music's not supposed to be for kids. Unfortunately, that's changed, and now it's marketed more to teenagers and people in their 20s, but whatever. So it's very apparent. Obviously, by the time you get to Nebraska, you really have seen his country, folky sort of side, right? You know, after he read Woody Guthrie's book and all that sort of stuff. But on here, in terms of the lyrics, it's very adult. This is not kids stuff. There's no song on this record that's like, oh, that's the hit single. A lot of these songs are very well known now. A lot of these songs got a decent rotation on FM radio in 78, 79, but none of these songs are quote unquote top 10 singles because they don't market to that crowd. They don't serve to that audience at all. Hungry Heart does later on down the road. And he wanted to give that song to the Ramones, but this track, so I admire, it's very admirable that you're able to literally just toss out all of these other songs that have maybe more potential radio quality to them. And they're all great, and toss them to the side for something that's a little bit more important at the end of the day, right? So let's go through the tracks one by one, and then we'll kind of talk a little more. So you've obviously you kick off the record with Badlands, which is, and I opened the show by reading the first few lines of that song, but this is also Bruce talking to himself. He wants the heart, he wants the soul, he wants control right now. This is a guy that's in a legal battle that can't put out material. So he's stuck writing songs and touring, right? So, all music, and again, as a songwriter, I can say this, all music is autobiographical because you have to go down into your soul. It's a magic trick. Every time you write a song, it's literally magic, right? You have to go down into your soul and find whatever you find. You come up with these ideas, and sometimes they're a little more dramatic and sometimes they're a little less dramatic. But at the end of the day, you conjure what's ever inside of you, all the experiences you've ever gone through, all the things that they say, write what you know, right? So all songs in one way, shape, or form are autobiographical and or based on something or somebody that you've experienced or in your life. They might not currently be in your life. They may have been in your life at some point. They might still be. Doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. That's where you get the songs. That's how you get, to that place as a songwriter. So you've got Badlands, right? Then you've got Adam Raised a Cain. And this is the first time of a few in this album where the idea of faith is brought up. And this is definitely the first album of his where that idea happens. And honestly, pretty much every record after that has that, not so much religion, but has that idea of faith and a better place. And, where you're at now is ultimately not where you're going to end up. And that there's an idea that there's, better opportunities down the road. And that's where faith comes in. But Adam Raised a Cain is straight up out of Genesis in the Bible. You had, he sings it in the song, Cain slew Abel, and again, what is this song about? This song is about, two brothers, this song is about relationships. This song is about, you're born into this life paying for the sins of someone else's past. Daddy worked his whole life for nothing but the pain. Now he walks these empty rooms looking for something to blame. You inherit the sins. You inherit the flames. Adam raised a Cain. The song's about original sin. At the end of the day, the song is about being born into a world where you got to carry the sins from your ancestors, from the guy down the block, the people in your neighborhood, all the things that are going on. It's the idea that we all have these struggles and these sins and these dark clouds and everything, and not all of them are our doing. We weren't necessarily responsible for them all. The decisions when you're a child that your parents make aren't on you, though they affect your life very much so. The choices when you get older and when you're an adult, if you have a boss and you have a job, right? You're not necessarily the one calling the shots. So if your company does something that's bad, Well, they might blame you, but it ultimately wasn't your decision in the first place. So it's about all of that and so much more, right? So Adam raised a Cain. Okay. You've got Something in the Night. Something in the Night is one of the most beautiful songs. Roy's piano playing at the beginning of it is absolutely bone chilling. Okay. And it's so cinematic. I think this is a great opportunity now to talk about the cinematic elements of Springsteen's music. Uh, all of his songs are very cinematic, definitely starting with the album Born to Run and pretty much going through all the way to now with Letter to You. Um, they're movies. This album deserves to be adapted into a film. I've been wanting to make this film for 10 plus years. I would love to adapt Born to Run into a film and Darkness on the Edge of Town into a film, and not musicals, but take the themes and the characters and the elements of these albums and translate them onto screen, right? Because it's all there. The source material is amazing. Everybody else is out there adapting comic books, which is great. But I'm looking at this going, this is Academy Award winning material here, source material to adapt into a screenplay. That's how cinematic it is. I'm riding down Kingsley, figuring I'll get a drink, turn the radio up loud so I don't have to think. I take her to the floor looking for a moment when the world seems right, and I tear into the guts of Something in the Night. You're born with nothing and better off that way. Soon as you got something, they send someone to try and take it away. You can ride this road till dawn without another human being in sight, just kids wasted on Something in the Night. And then like the hook of the song is this: nothing is forgotten or forgiven when it's your last time around. I got stuff running around my head I just can't live down. This is all about dealing with trauma. The characters in this song, you get to the last toward they caught us at the state line and they burned our cars in one last fight and left us running, burning, blind, chasing something. Who? We don't know who. It doesn't matter who. Somebody, right? Whether it's the cops or it's a rival gang or, other streetcar racers. It doesn't matter. They found the things we loved. They were crushed and dying in the dirt. We tried to pick up the pieces and get away without getting hurt. This song's about trauma. And we'll talk about racing in the street here in a few minutes. But it's this idea, again, a lot of this album, it's so dense, but a lot of this album is the envisioning of the characters that you heard about in early 60s pop music. The Dead Man's Curve by Jan and Dean, the Little Deuce Coupe by the Beach Boys, all these young, youthful, optimistic love songs, more or less, or tragedy songs, rather, the best of both worlds. You get love songs and tragedy songs mixed together. Okay. Well, whatever happened to those characters that were 16, 17 years old in those tracks are now in their 30s. Okay. Whatever happened to those characters? Well, this is one perspective of that. It didn't really pan out in the long run for all of them. So you have this song like Something in the Night, which is a great companion piece. Same with Racing in the Street. They're great companion pieces to some of that early 60s pop music. It's like, oh, this is when we were young and in love, and now we're adults, and it's not all bad, but hey, this album's going to kind of point out the bad, right? Because that's adult life. Some days are great. Some days are average, mediocre, mundane. And then other times it's like, yeah, you still love these people and you're going to stick around, but you go through hard times, you go through challenges, right? And it's, that's more in his writing, starting with The River, is not everybody always sticks around. Some people are running out the back door. So let's jump over to Candy's Room, which is my second favorite track on the record. It's short, sweet, to the point. Max's drumming is shining, just gleaming on this record. It's so tight and it's so dark. you know, and I love the song Candy's Boy that didn't make the record that is on The Promise. You know, but what kind of woman, you know, it's so funny. You look at a song like She's the One off Born to Run, you know, with her killer graces and her secret places that no boy can fill, with her hands on her hips and the smile on her lips, boy, she knows that it kills me. With that soft French cream standing in the doorway like a dream, I wish she'd just leave me alone. You know, but French cream won't soften them boots and French kisses when I break that heart of stone. You know, she's tough. She's a tough woman, you know, and she ain't letting everybody inside, you know, her heart. I'm not talking like in a sexual way. But here's this guy that's like, yeah, but she's the one, you know, so I'm going to do whatever it's going to take to win her over. Right. And it's like, okay, that's ballsy. You know, it's definitely something somebody in their 20s would say. You know, say the same thing in your 30s. But here's a character, you know, Candy's Room. And it's like, it's that, but 20% darker. You know, in Candy's Room, there are pictures of her heroes on the wall. But to get to Candy's room, you got to walk the darkness of Candy's hall. Strangers from the city call my baby's number and they bring her toys. When I come knocking, she smiles pretty. She knows I want to be Candy's boy. There's a sadness in that pretty face, a sadness all her own, from which no man can keep Candy safe. We kiss, my heart's pumping in my brain, the blood rushes to my veins when I touch Candy's lips. We go driving deep into the night. I go driving deep into the light in Candy's eyes. She says, and then here's the, you know, it goes up and the whole band comes in. She says, baby, if you want to be wild, you got a lot to learn. Close your eyes, let them melt, let them fire, let them burn. Because in the darkness, they'll be hidden in worlds that shine. When I hold Candy close, she makes the hidden worlds mine. You know, she's got fancy clothes and diamond rings. She's got men who'll give her anything she wants, but they don't see that what she wants is me. It's got so much perspective, you know, for a song written by a man that's in his late 20s. It's got so much perspective. And that comes from listening to Hank Williams. That comes from living and going through things. That comes from experiencing terrible trauma, you know, and dark. I mean, we're using the word darkness in this case, you know, and darkness is so much more universal. You know, a term that they use a lot now is like trauma, right? So here's a guy, he has Born to Run come out. Now he's in this legal fight. And, you know, it's like you finally make it somewhere and then they come and they take it away. You know, that's something in the night. I mean, it's proof in the pudding right there. So Candy's Room. But let's get to Racing in the Street. Racing in the Street, you know, it definitely references Dancing in the Street, which was a great Motown song, I think originally by Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, which is one of my favorite Motown groups ever. You know, and everybody's covered it, the Mamas and the Papas and Mick Jagger and David Bowie, and everybody's covered it over the years. But, you know, this idea of something that's joyful is immediately given a 180. You know, I don't need to sit here and read all the lyrics. You can look them up yourselves. But, you know, for me, the story is great. The story is about these street racers and these car guys that are older now. Whatever happened to the kids from Little Deuce Coupe by the Beach Boys? Well, here we are 10, 15 years later. Now they're in their 30s. Okay. I met her on the strip 3 years ago in a Camaro with this dude from LA. I blew that Camaro off my back and I drove that little girl away. But now there's wrinkles round my baby's eyes and she cries herself to sleep at night. When I come home, the house is dark. She sighs, baby, did you make it all right? She sits on the porch of her daddy's house, but all her little dreams been torn. She stares off alone into the night with the eyes of one who hates for just being born. For all the shutdown strangers and hot rod angels rumbling through this promised land, tonight my baby and me, we're going to ride to the sea and wash these sins off our hands. But then it goes back to the, well, tonight, the strip's just right. Out of our way, mister, you best keep, because summer's here and the time is right for racing in the street. It's one of the greatest songs ever written. It's one of my favorite songs ever. It's such a beautiful song that I think when everybody gets to a certain age in their 20s, it should be, we had required reading when we were kids in school. I think this is required listening, because not everybody's got the same story. And obviously it's not 1978 anymore. This is a record that's, 45 years old, but it still holds true. The themes and the ideas that are on this album still 100% ring that bell and are just as relevant today as they were in 1978. But the song's about loss. The song's about regret. The song's about, Thunder Road is so optimistic. It's a town full of losers. I'm pulling out of here to win. It's another car song. And it's this guy and Mary, But that character's older now. And it's not all sunshine and rainbows anymore, and you got to point that out. So let's pick things up a little bit. Let's move over to the Promised Land. Let's flip the record over and turn on side 2. So the Promised Land is just one of my favorite songs ever, but it's about these car guys. It's about these street racers and whatnot. But what's important is that the characters in this song, the main protagonist in this song, the chorus goes, the dogs on Main Street howl because they understand if I could take one moment into my hands, mister, I ain't a boy, no, I'm a man, and I believe in a promised land. Again, the song is not overtly religious. They're not overtly saying, hey, this song's about Jesus Christ and going to heaven and God and the Bible and all that sort of stuff. It's the idea that this is a guy on a rattlesnake speedway in the Utah desert. I pick up my money and head back into town. Got the radio on and I'm just killing time, working all day in my daddy's garage, driving all night chasing some mirage. Pretty soon, little darling, I'm going to take charge. It's about a guy that believes in something better, in bettering himself, in bettering his situation, in bettering his relationship with his girlfriend or his family members or his relatives or his friends or whatever it is. He believes in a promised land. Yes, you have the face value textbook promised land being heaven. But then you also have the idea of this is where you're at now and believing that it can get better, and a great track, the closer on Nebraska, Reason to Believe. What a dour situation all those characters went through, but they still have a reason to believe. If you don't have hope, you got nothing in this world, and if you don't have somebody to believe in and somebody to confide in, the world will become a very lonely place rather quickly. And this does a great job at presenting that in a song. Okay. So then you got Factory. Factory is pretty cut and dry. The song's about his father and the factories that his father worked in and his father's friends and other relatives that he knew growing up in Freehold, New Jersey. It's a short song. It's under 3 minutes. A lot of people would say it's probably the weakest track on the record. Why couldn't you switch that out and put something else on there? Well, it's further driving home the themes and narrative structure and characters that are in this album that live and inhabit this world. Okay. What do they do when they're not street racing? What do these people do that gave that up? What do the people do that gave up the other dreams and idealisms that they had? This is 1978. the hippie movement, the idea of free love and peace and drugs and sex and rock and roll and all that sort of stuff. Not only are those people now 10 years older and forced to live in reality to a degree, but also in life, that happened. It's 1978. We're going into the Carter recession. Times are not the way they were 10 years ago. Vietnam's over, but we've got trouble on the home front. You've got an economy. He'll later sing about all this in the river, but you've got economic uncertainty that's right around the corner and all these sorts of things. The world has changed. It's 1978. Elvis is dead now. The one thing that kind of united everybody was Elvis, and he's gone, right? Punk rock is very much an influence on this album as well, because you had the whole punk scene in New York City that was really rising and coming up, and Springsteen had his ear to the ground on all that. And it's grungy and it's dirty and it's, raw. And that's in all of this as well. The same thing, punk rock, country music, it's all there under the guise of rock and roll, right? So you have that. So Factory is a very important song, especially when it comes to kind of getting the point across that, it's tough. It's tough. Streets of Fire, kind of similar a little bit to Something in the Night. But if you look at it on side one, right, you have Badlands, which is a statement song. This is where we're at. You have Adam Raised a Cain, which is almost a little bit of, okay, this is where I'm at in Badlands. Now I'm going to give you a little history. We're going to go back a moment, almost like a Martin Scorsese opening. Like, let's take the opening of Casino. De Niro walks out, the car blows up. And then it cuts and it goes back. And it's like, well, how did we get there? Okay. Well, how do we get to Badlands? Well, Adam Raised a Cain, Something in the Night, Candy's Room, Racing in the Street. They all better contextualize how we got there. Why is this guy, wanting the heart and the soul and control, talk about a dream, try to make it real. You wake up in the night with a fear so real, spend your life waiting for a moment that just don't come. Well, don't waste your time waiting. How did we get there? Well, we got there through better contextualizing it through Adam Raised a Cain, Something in the Night, Candy's Room, and Racing in the Street, which are all pretty dour, for the most part. But you get, side two, with the exception of, The Promised Land is a lot more optimistic. Factory, not so much. But The Promised Land is a lot more optimistic. But then Factory regrounds us back into reality. Track listings are very important, especially in the album days. You had your four corners, your opener and your closer on each side of the album. And all four of those tracks, still to this day, when you're listening to an album, especially your opener and your closer, they're the most important songs on the album, because the first song's introducing you to what the album's going to be, right? And then the last song is kind of like your final words, right? So Streets of Fire is similar to Something in the Night with the themes and ideas, but it's far more optimistic. When the night's quiet, you don't care anymore, and your eyes are tired, and there's someone at your door, and you realize you want to let go, and the weak lies and the cold walls you embrace eat at your insides and leave you to face with Streets of Fire. I live now only with strangers. I talk to only strangers. I walk with angels that have no place. Streets of Fire, Streets of Fire, Streets of Fire. But it has this sense of optimism, even if it's only in Roy Bittan's piano playing, even if it's only in the lift of the song. This guy's not giving up hope. Things are that bad, but he's not giving up. And that leads us right into the next track, which is Prove It All Night, which is my favorite Bruce Springsteen song, number one. I love the 1978 intro. I've seen countless live videos that are anywhere from 7 to 11 minutes long of a track that's really less than 5 minutes on the album. And it's so raw because we've gotten all of these other songs that are about street racers and what they're going through, right? And the women in their lives that are so unhappy. And we've gotten, contextualization with songs like Factory and Adam Raised a Cain on how did they get there in the first place. But at the end of the day, what is driving you? What is getting you to wake up in the morning? And for a lot of people, it's love. And this is maybe the best example of that. I think it's one of the greatest love songs ever because most love songs are not real. They're not realistic whatsoever. I love Elton John's Your Song or Maybe I'm Amazed by Paul McCartney. I mean, they're beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And they're real for moments. They're real for that day in a year time period, or that 20 minutes there, that hour there, or whatever it is. That's real. But in the long run, in a given year, not every day is Maybe I'm Amazed. Not every day is Your Song. Not every day is Peaceful, Easy Feeling. Okay. There's a lot more to it and it's complex. But I've been working real hard trying to get my hands clean. I use the word ass. I've been working real hard trying to get my ass clean. Not in a literal sense, but in a metaphorical one. Tonight we'll drive that dusty road from Monroe to Angeline to buy you a gold ring and a pretty dress of blue. Baby, just one kiss will get these things for you. A kiss to seal our fate tonight and a kiss to prove it all night. Prove it all night, girl. There's nothing else that we can do. Prove it all night, girl. I'll prove it all night for you. Everybody's got a hunger they can't resist. There's so much that you want. You deserve much more than this. And if dreams came true, oh, wouldn't that be nice? But this ain't no dream we're living through tonight. Girl, you want it, you take it, you pay the price. And then the towards the end, you hear voices telling you not to go. They made their choices and they'll never know what it means to steal, to cheat, to lie, what it's like to live or die, to prove it all night. To prove it all night. How far are you willing to go? How far are you willing to work at it on a daily basis? That's what it's going to take every day, week after week, month after month, year after year. You got to prove it to yourself and you got to prove it to everybody else. Some days it's a literal thing. Some days it's a metaphorical thing, but it's always within that spectrum. Some days you ain't got much to do. Other days you got the whole world on your shoulders. And then everything else in between. So Prove It All Night, just very much so, emphasizes that that's just how it is. What are you going to do about it? How far are you willing to go? And then the album ends with Darkness on the Edge of Town. Well, they're still racing out at the trestles, but that blood, it never burned in her veins. Now I hear she's got a house up in Fairview in a style she's trying to maintain. Well, if she wants to see me, you can tell her that I'm easily found in the darkness on the edge of town. Well, which character didn't it work out for? Is it the guy in Racing in the Street? Is it the guy in Candy's room? Is it the characters in Something in the Night? Are they all the same characters? That's what's so great and that's what's so open-ended about it is he gives people names, but not everybody names. So, maybe it's the same characters that are in all these songs, but it didn't work out. If she wants to see me, tell her I'm easily found. Tell her there's a spot out neath Abrams Bridge and tell her there's a darkness on the edge of town. And the line, tonight I'll be on that hill because I can't stop. I'll be on that hill with everything I got. Lives on the line where dreams are found and lost. I'll be there every time and I'll pay the cost for wanting things that can only be found. I just, I lost my money and I lost my wife. Them things don't seem to matter much to me now. This is a guy that's lost everything. And he's going to be there still working away at it in the darkness on the edge of town. And, it's so telling. The song is so telling that it's not always a happy ending. And it didn't work out for this guy, and he's got his issues just like every other person in the world does, his own internal struggles, his own demons that he's got to fight and chase on a daily basis. And he's not giving up. He's still here. He's not giving up on his dream. He's not, for better or for worse, maybe, maybe he should. Some people would listen to this and go, this guy's an idiot. It's time to park the car away, go get a normal job and win her back, and some people would go, no, you just got to keep fighting. You got to keep fighting. You got to keep doing what you do. And, obviously she just doesn't understand and it's not going to work, but that's how I look at this record. That's how I look at pretty much all albums. It's like a novel, and you got to tear it apart, and you got to read the characters, and you got to read the themes. And it's like, it's not just the lyrics. It's not just the melody. You've got the E Street Band playing on this record. What's Clarence's saxophone supposed to symbolize? What's Roy's piano playing on a given song supposed to mean? What's Max's drumming, or Gary's bass playing, or Danny's organ playing, or Steve, whatever. When Bruce plays the guitar, it's a character in the song. He's making his guitar. He's playing in a way, especially on a song, Adam Raised a Cain, it's almost like this like jungle rumble, this real dark entity that's coming out of something, coming out of the bowels of hell, and it's just a masterpiece, So I've gone through all the tracks, again, the album, the pictures from the album, the cover of it and everything, album cover art is something that's, been slowly dying a terrible death for the last 25, 30 years. But at the end of the day, for me, it's like, the Beatles is my favorite band. They've been my favorite band since I was 5 years old, and I love them. But, you look at their album covers and it's like, okay, the cover of Abbey Road tells you nothing about the songs that are on the album. This is something that definitely started in the 70s, which is you look at the cover and it should be, before you even put the needle down on the record, it should be very telling of what you're getting into and if you want to visit these people or not. Do you want to just keep driving down the road and not stop? John Prine used to say this all the time, that when the minor chord is coming up in a song, something bad's about to happen. And if the song starts in a minor chord, you just might not want to visit that family, or whatever he said. But it's so true, and you look at that cover and it's like the follow-up to Born to Run, which has got him and Clarence on it, and they just look so jovial. Things look pretty bleak on this record. It's coffee black, and for me, the third person that's instrumental, no pun intended, to this record is Chuck Plotkin, who mixed the record. Jimmy and Bruce, obviously very important. John Landau, Steve Van Zandt, the Holy Street Band, all very important. But, the story of, I want the beginning of Prove It All Night to sound like a couple's out on a picnic, having a nice, happy day, and then it cuts to a dead body. And the beginning of Prove It All Night is the cutaway to that dead body, and it's so film noir and so cinematic in quality, right? And it's so very much coming from 1940s and 1950s movies, and but when Chuck Plotkin showed up, they called him in, they just kind of had him mix the whole record. And it's like, it's so telling of, again, the first two albums are great. I like the Live at Hammersmith stuff that was on the second record a lot more from the live album than I did the studio recording. And I just kind of blame the fact that they still just didn't know what to do with Springsteen yet. Born to Run, as great as it is, it's like the Phil Spector wall of sound. We get to Darkness, and the idea of faith and hope are going to constantly come up again in every single record that comes out after this. He really came into his own. He'd been in his own as a songwriter, but he came in his own as a songwriter that's going, okay, well, not everything's got to be rock and roll music like everybody else makes. We can incorporate the themes and ideas of country and, at the time, punk rock into the music, right? And it's all there. And it's all there on the record. So I'm going to end this video here in a minute. Definitely want to do more of this sort of stuff. Very, deep dives into albums. So if you're unfamiliar with Springsteen's work and you've watched this video, you've got some places to start. If you're a big Springsteen fan like myself, then, maybe I've said a thing or two that you hadn't quite thought about before. And, maybe you can let me know in the comments what you think about this album and maybe what it means to you. And that's what's great about albums, is that songs in general, they're meant to be universal, but simultaneously personal to the individual listener that's hearing the song. So when you go to write a song, it's like you got to have both of those things in mind. It's very much a yin yang sort of situation. You're writing it for you, but you're writing it for everyone simultaneously, right? So it's kind of crazy. But this is a very transformative record, and it's so interesting in the pantheon of Springsteen material. This was the hardest nut for me to crack. I obviously like songs like Badlands and The Promised Land and Prove It All Night. But when I was younger, much younger, I'd put this album on and you'd get through side one and it was just like, oh, what a drag. When you're 18 years old or 19 years old, it's just like, oh, this is what I've got to look forward to. Oh my gosh. Can we go back and listen to, Maybe I'm Amazed by Paul McCartney? Because that's a little more, what an 18-year-old wants to hear. But by the time I was like 20 or 21, again, I always loved the album, because it's a masterpiece, right? But by the time I was like 21, I listened to it again and it was like, oh, I cracked the nut. I cracked the code. I kind of get where he's going. And now that I'm in my early 30s, right? It's a whole different contextualization because you have 12 more years of perspective, and life that you've lived, and kind of looking back at things going, well, they don't have to be that way, but I can see when they are, So let me know what you guys think about this. I want to do more. I definitely want to do more Springsteen ones. I also want to do there's a few Tom Petty records, specifically You're Gonna Get It and Damn the Torpedoes. Also Wildflowers. I'd like to do, talk about AC/DC's Back in Black, because I think that's another masterpiece of a record that's very mainstream, but in a world where people don't really listen to rock music as much anymore, it's still very important. Would like to talk about some Bob Dylan albums, maybe some Beatles records, some Rolling Stones records, and all that other sort of stuff. But this has been the first deep dive I've done on an album live on air. I do it myself all the time in conversations in the car. You can find me everywhere at Rob Fishbeck. And subscribe, hit that like button, all that stuff. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys later. Take it easy.